Hello and welcome back to What's Millie Making, where I'm Millie, and this is a space where I talk about the past, present, and future of my making, primarily knitting. Today's video is Knitting Podcast, episode 7, and it's going to be a shorter one, I think, because I'm recording this the weekend before Rhinebeck with the hopes of it going live either on Rhinebeck weekend or the weekend after. And as is expected, most of my knitting energy has been focused on my Rhinebeck project, so I don't have as many things to talk about this episode, but that's okay. We can just get into things. So I do have one finished object, which is a test knit, which I talked about in my previous episode, and it is the Norfolk sweater by Hiris Makes. So as I said, this is the Norfolk sweater by Hiris Makes. This is a test knit and the pattern is officially live. It is such a beautiful pattern. It is knit top down with a contiguous sleeve construction. So there's a little bit of neckline shaping that you knit flat in the beginning, but all the colorwork is knit in the round, and none of the colorwork sections are too large, so you never get stuck in the slog of things. And I don't really think there's many spots where I had to catch floats. And I also really liked that there were colorwork charts for each size. So all of the increases in the colorwork are charted, which I find very, very helpful. And honestly, I think this would be a great colorwork project if you've never knit colorwork before or a colorwork garment. This would be, I think, a lovely first project. The pattern really holds your hands, but not in a way that feels like overwhelming. Like I feel like sometimes patterns give too much information and then it can get confusing. I found this to be easy to understand, easy to knit, and I think the way that it's constructed, so you have these colorwork sections and then you have some like garter ridge sections. So I was always motivated to basically want to, if I was in the garter ridge section, I'd be like, oh my god, I have to keep knitting until I finish the garter ridge section. And then when I was in the colorwork section, I was like, oh my god, I have to keep knitting until I finish this colorwork section. And just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it just moved along so quickly. So really, really enjoyable project. Plus, it's knit with worsted weight yarn on 5.5mm needles. So definitely a fast moving project. I actually think depending on the color combinations you pick for this, this could be such a cute holiday project because one of the like the pattern photos, the sample knits, whatever you want to call it, is done in green and white. And I feel like that's just, even if you don't celebrate Christmas, like green and white just feels very holiday-y to me. So that's just something to keep in mind. And now that I'm looking at it, wait, this could actually also be a very cute advent project because you could do like each row of color work in a different advent calendar, in a different advent color. That would be very cute too, especially if you have a fade. Like last year, I did something similar where I picked a colorwork project, and for one of the colors, instead of using a solid color, I was fading my advent, and that's totally something I think you could do with this project. What else is there to say about it? I was definitely playing yarn chicken with this project because I knew going into it that I had less yarn than recommended, but I did knit the body a little bit shorter as well as the sleeves. So there was one more colorwork chart that you could add to the bottom of this, but because I'm short, I think adding it just would have made the sweater too long for me, as well as the same thing with the sleeves. So I just got away with the amount of yarn I have. Like I literally had no scraps whatsoever of my main color, and actually, so you can see how I added contrast color tips to the ends of the sweater. That's not written in the pattern, I just modified it. But for the body, actually half of the sweater has half a row less of the pink ribbing because I ran out of the yarn and I didn't really want to frog half a row, and you can't even tell when it's worn. I can't even tell like where I did that just looking at the sweater. So yeah, that's that. I actually gave this sweater to my mom. I took it back so I could talk about it on the podcast, but she really, really liked it. And I already have so many sweaters, so she liked it. I said, okay, you can wear it. And she's like, okay, I will take it, but if you want to wear it, you can take it from me. So I guess it's a shared sweater. And I do have some photos of her wearing it. She's much thinner than me, so when she wears it, there's definitely a lot more positive ease. When I wear it, it is much more closer fitting to my body. I really like the details on the contiguous sleeve construction. I messed it up in certain spots in the front, but honestly, I think it blocked out fine. So when you are knitting the yoke, you definitely do have to pay attention to when you're increasing, because you're not increasing at the same rate and at like the same spot in each section. So yeah, just make sure you pay attention where you're increasing and you should be fine. I was not paying attention. I was like watching TV or reading or something, and I did mess up some of the increases in the colorwork, and I just kind of fudged it. But honestly, you cannot tell unless you know what you're looking for. Is there anything else I want to talk about? Oh, the yarn and the cost. My main color, I have to look at my notes to see this. The main color that I used in the sweater is Wooldreamers Mota that I bought at VKL this year. So $16 times 3. I used 3 full balls, no leftovers whatsoever. That is $48. Then for the contrast color, oh, one thing I have to say about Wooldreamers Mota, I think it's sold as a DK weight, but it's a very, very heavy DK weight. I would easily say it works at a worsted weight gauge. I actually would categorize it as a worsted weight, because I know also there are some Ozetta patterns that are knit with this yarn, and when I've knit them and I wanted to sub in a yarn for it, I ended up using worsted weight yarn. So I think it's labeled as a DK, but just from my experience, I would say it is more of a worsted weight yarn, and I totally want to knit with this yarn again. I love the feel of it. It is a more woolly wool, but I think it blocks out really nicely, and I personally can wear it next to skin, and my mom also, actually she wore it over a t-shirt. So take that as you will. Also, I think this is one of their yarn bases that they use the wool from the sheep that grow Manchego cheese, which I think is very cute. So that was $48. And then for my contrast color, I used 2 different yarns that I bought during the New Jersey Wool Walk. One that I bought last year and one that I bought this year. So the wool that I used is a locally dyed plant dyed DK weight wool that was $25, and I used 92 grams of it, so that cost is $23. For all these edges, as well as for the collar, I did not hold the wool with the mohair. I just held the wool alone. And then for the colorwork, I did hold the wool with the mohair just to hit gauge. And actually the colors like worked out perfectly, even though I did not buy these 2 yarns together in mind. So I used a hand-dyed mohair by Lavender Fiber Co. And every year for the New Jersey Wool Walk, they donate some hand-dyed skeins to Beyond Yarn, which is a yarn store in Union, New Jersey, and all the proceeds from that yarn go to support the specialized children's hospital, and all the skeins are $15. So I got that hand-dyed skein of mohair for $15, and I used 41 grams. No, did I use 41 grams? I used 41% of it, I think. So that is $6.15. So the total cost of the sweater was $77.15. And I think I knit the size 4. So personally, for like my personal yarn budget, getting to knit a garment with hand-dyed yarn for $100 is great in my books. So I'm very, very happy with this sweater. And oh yeah, that's another thing about this sweater. I used less than 100 grams of wool for my size. So depending on your size, if you just have like a special skein of hand-dyed DQ8 or worsted weight yarn, you can make the first 4 sizes of this sweater, depending on the length. Because I think if you did extend the length, you might run out. Unsure. But I can confidently say for the one that I knit, less than 100 grams of DK weight or worsted weight yarn. Or I guess for worsted weight, it will probably depend on the yardage of the worsted weight. The DK weight wool that I used, it was 100 grams, 250 yards. So it just depends on the base that you're using. And that is that for my finished object. That's my only finished object from the past month and a half-ish, I think, since I last recorded. So my first work in progress is the one that has been taking up most, if not all, of my attention and energy over the past few weeks, and it is the Orkney cardigan. I think actually on Ravelry it's called Orkney, but I've been calling it the Orkney cardigan by Marie Wallin. And this is actually an amalgamation of a bunch of different patterns and inspirations and all that jazz. I feel like I've been continuously talking about it, but I don't want to assume that if you are watching this, you have watched my previous videos or you will watch my hopeful future video all about the sweater. So this is a Fair Isle Colorwork pattern that is designed by Marie Wallin. I'm sure I'll put like a picture of the pattern somewhere here on the screen. The pattern is written to be knit flat and knit bottom up with satin sleeves, and the pattern does have the colorwork on the sleeves too. This was just one of many modifications that I did. So I personally was inspired by this specific Molly Goddard sweater. There's like a sweater, there's a cardigan, there's a vest, all with the same motif that I really, really loved. So that was my inspiration to knit a Fair Isle garment where the body has the Fair Isle motifs going on, and then the sleeves are just striped with the same colors that are used in the body. So my original plan was to get inspiration from the color palette from that sweater as well, but there were just way too many colors used in this sweater that I wasn't able to like translate it one to one. So instead, I found a different Molly Goddard sweater, and I took my color inspiration from there. And my colors, I think, have a different vibe to them, but now that the body is all done, I personally can see the inspiration has been translated, in my opinion. I don't want anybody thinking like, she's so delusional. She thinks she knit this exact same sweater. No, I'm just saying, I do think I'm happy with the way it came out and the way that my vision translated. So many modifications were made to this sweater. I did not want to knit it flat, and I did not want to knit it bottom up because body length is something I definitely struggle with especially with cardigans, because I think when they get a little bit too long, it just ends up looking very awkward and unflattering on me, and it makes me not want to wear them. So it was very important for me to make sure that I got the length right, and that's definitely easier to manage when you're knitting a garment top down. I also did want to steek the cardigan because it just didn't really make sense for me to knit it flat if I could knit it in the round. Alas, the way that it was written, I'm not very familiar with Marie Wallin's writing style, as I've never knit any of her garments, and I'm definitely more used to patterns that I guess are a little bit more descriptive and just like a different style of construction. So I decided I'm just going to take the colorwork charts from the Orkney pattern, but find a different pattern to follow. I ended up buying the Sunshine Tea pattern by Andrea Gahn, which is a fingering weight top-down set-in sleeve sweater, and the set-in sleeves are knit by picking up the stitches along the armhole. Yeah, that was what I was looking for. And then I had to do a lot of math because the Orkney sweater has one gauge, I have a different gauge, and the Sunshine Tea has a third gauge. So I did all that math, and then finally I came up with this sweater. I think that is the majority of my modifications. Oh, the other modification. So like I said, I did modify this to be a steeked sweater. So when I was casting on stitches for the neckline, I cast on 5 extra stitches, and I have since reinforced those steeks, and the cardigan has just like a regular, I think, no, it has a corrugated ribbing. Is that how you pronounce that word? That sounds wrong coming out of my mouth. It has that colorwork ribbing, however you pronounce that word, but I personally didn't love the way it looked, so I decided to modify this to be a double knit button band. So after I did my machine sewn reinforcements, I picked up stitches for the button band 1 stitch after that. Because basically I cast on 5 stitches. The 2 outer stitches were purl stitches, and then the 3 inner stitches were knit stitches. So I did I did 2 reinforcements on each side of the center stitch, and then yeah, after that purl stitch, I left 1 stitch and picked up the stitches for my double knit button band. Another thing I learned while knitting this is the correct pickup ratio for a double knit button band is to pick up every single stitch, which thankfully people on Instagram told me. I had already knit like half of it at that point, so I ripped it out and did it again, but I figured I've already invested so much time and energy into this project, I might as well do it right. And that frogging is definitely something I have embraced while knitting this pattern. I have frogged a lot. So many things I frogged. This sleeve is the third iteration of this sleeve. The first time that I knit it like the sunshine tee pattern where you pick up stitches and start knitting the short row cap. But because of all the yarn ends around the arm line, I'll try to see if I can take a picture. It just was looking really lumpy and I didn't like the way it was looking. So I said, okay, I'll just sew in the sleeve, even though I hate mattress stitching or sewing garments. So then I started knitting that, and then it ended up being too big. So then I had to frog it and then knit it again for the third time. And finally, I'm here. I do think I'm going to actually frog it this, like the last third of it, because I think I did too many increases and it's sitting kind of fitted at the edge and it doesn't really match how wide it is at the top. So I guess we'll just see how much time I have left. Do I have any more yapping about this project? Like a lot of brain power and creative energy and determination went into this, but I'm so happy with how it's looking. It's totally wackadoodle, but I think it's very me, and I'm so excited to wear it, even if I am a little bit scared to stick it. Another modification I do want to do is, so I'm actually wearing my cardigan number 9. That's the name of it, right? And before you knit the neckline ribbing in this cardigan, after you pick up stitches, you knit a few rows of double knitting, and I think it just like cinches up the neckline. As you can see, this is a fairly wide neckline, and I personally don't love a wide neckline, so I do think I'm going to take that tip from the cardigan number 9. When I pick up stitches, I'm going to do a few rows of double knitting just to kind of tighten it up before I go into my 1x1 rib. As far as the yarns go for the sweater, it's like I am using a whole bunch of different yarns for the sweater. Some of them are leftovers from other projects, like this blue is a leftover from a cabled sweater that I knit. Some of them I bought during the New Jersey Wool Walk. This orange is actually the same base as this is the same plant dyed wool that I used in my Norfolk sweater, just a different color. The red and the pink are the two yarns that I bought for this project. They are Juniper Moon Farms Patagonia, which is a light DK / sport weight yarn, which I really like. It's a kind of loosely plied, I think 2-ply. It's quite airy, and those are actually the only two yarns that I have single strands. They're definitely thinner, but I think once I blocked it out, they easily made like fluffed up and filled out, and it matched the gauge of the thicker yarns. Because there's actually a lot of also fingering weight yarns in here that I held double. I did run out of a few of the yarns. I ran out of the hot pink, which was West Wool, whatever the the Stephen and Penelope in-house brand yarn. And I ran out of it in the middle, but I actually ended up finding a yarn in my stash that looked almost like exactly the same. That's not gonna work. I'll insert like B-roll footage of the close-up, but I had this leftover Mondim by Retro Zarya Pomar, and I switched it in the middle of the row, and honestly, I think it works in pretty seamlessly, so that was great. The other yarn that I ran out of this like light pinky purple yarn that is Sandnes Garn Tin Pure Gint, and I really like the feel of this yarn. It's quite toothy and woolly, but when it blocks out, I think it blocks out very nicely. It definitely you can definitely feel it on your skin, but I find it wearable still. Which is kind of funny because one of the first yarns that I ever bought for one of my first sweater projects was Sandnes Garn, I think Fritz Garn. I'm definitely butchering that pronunciation. It's like their Aran or bulky weight Norwegian wool, and I found that to be so scratchy. But the Tin Peergant is also a Norwegian wool, and I find it fine to wear. And I look forward to eventually getting a garment either with the Peergant or the Tin Peergant. And then the last yarn that I ran out of, which I was really sad because I think this yarn is so beautiful, it was the dark purple, and that was Garthenor. No, don't. Was it the sock base? I don't remember, but it will be on the screen somewhere. And again, it's in my Ravelry project page. It has a very slight marl to it, and it was so beautiful. But repurchasing it, none of the U.S. retailers that carry Garthenor had this colorway, so I would have to order it directly from them, and it would cost me like over $30 just to get that one skein with the shipping. So yeah, paying over $30 for 50 grams of wool was just exorbitantly expensive for me. But lucky for me, this button band is knit with a yarn in my stash that functions very similarly to the Garthenor. Like, unless I'm looking at it directly in the sun, I honestly cannot tell the difference between the two. And the one that I'm using in my button band is the Barocco Lana's Light in the black cherry colorway. I really like this colorway. It is a very deep purple, but it has like bits of reddish hues in it. And for the ribbing on the bottom, I did hold it double stranded because it's like a heavy fingering / sport weight yarn. And in the sleeves, I have some of the Garthenor left. So in the sleeves, I've been holding one strand of the Garthenor, which is like a light fingering, with one strand of the Barocco, and it works fine. And then for the body ribbing, I'm holding the Barocco double stranded, and it is very squishy and plump, which I like. And I'm going to do that, I think, also at the end of the sleeves. But then for this double knit button band, I was holding it double, and it was just looking really chunky because this fabric is double knit, so it's already quite thick. So I ended up just holding it single, and I think it looks great. I'm really proud of this project, and I'm excited to knit more Fair Isle projects in the future. Maybe I will stick to this psychedelic color palette. Maybe I will choose something more subdued. Definitely by my next knitting podcast, knock on wood, this will be a finished object. I actually remember there's one last thing I wanted to talk about this project. So I saw this tip, I forget, either Instagram or YouTube or somewhere, where instead of worrying about weaving in all the ends of your color work, you can just braid them together, and as long as you're using like a non-superwash wool, they should eventually felt together. And that's what I did on the sleeves, and it worked out really well. I think it looks so much cleaner. Like, it was really stressing me out how much yarn ends there were, and yeah, just braiding them all together was much less stressful. And I'm planning on doing the same thing with all these yarn ends in the sleeve. Like, I'm not weaving this all in. I'm just going to braid them together. They do look really pretty like this though. Like, seeing it as like a fringe. And then for the yarn ends on the body, I don't think I have to weave them in because I made sure to join in the yarn on the steek. So I think when I cut, the yarn ends will go bye-bye. And even like the inside out, the wrong side of the sweater, I think is still so pretty. I'm just obsessed. My next whip is one I had initially wanted to finish before I finished my Orkney sweater, because this is also one I have modified to be steeked, but I just ran out of time, and I'm not beating myself up for it. It happens. And even though I am scared about steeking, I'm still pretty confident with my steek for the Orkney. I'm using all non-super wash wools. It should be okay. If it's not, there's always no fray glue. There's always things that can be remedied. Oh my god, there's so much dust. I really hope too much of it is not ending up on camera. If it is, I apologize. There's really nothing I can do about it. Anyhow, Okay, so this sweater is the Ava cardigan by Petite Knit, and I think since the last time I talked about it, I actually have made a decent amount of progress. I finished the body, I knit the ridiculously long ribbing that took me forever. It took me a whole weekend, and not like a whole weekend where I spent like an hour knitting. I'm pretty sure I spent several hours knitting on Saturday and Sunday to get it done. But I really, really liked that design detail, so I didn't want to cut it short. So here we are. I do believe that I knit the body shorter than what the pattern is written as, but it's still a little bit on the longer side. I think I could have cropped it even further, but I had so much of this wool that I did want to get good use out of it, so I just knit it a little bit longer. And I'll talk about the wool in a second. Let's talk about the construction of the sweater. So this is a contiguous sleeve construction. I think you knit the sleeve cap of the sweater while you knit the sleeve cap on the arms while you are knitting the yoke. So what I did is I followed the instructions for the yoke exactly as written, and then you reach a point where you join the front and the back and you're knitting the whole body flat. And I did the same thing as I did with my Orkney sweater, except I did cast on a few more stitches, and this one I cast on 7 stitches. Again, the 2 outer stitches were purl stitches, and I'm going to do the same thing where I reinforce the steeks on each side and then pick up and again modify the button band to be a double knit button band because I just like the way that they look. There are quite a few people who have modified it to have a double knit button band, so it's always helpful to look at other people's notes on that. Also, a few people have modified it to mimic the button band on the Paul cardigan, I want to say. I don't remember the designer's name off the top of my head, but I will write it on the screen. And that cardigan has a double knit button band, but then on the back of the neck, it has a 2x2 rib, and I think that detail looks really, really cool. I haven't purchased that pattern, so I'm not sure how it's done, but if I had to take a guess, I'm guessing you knit the double knit button band as per usual, and then once you get to like the shoulder seam, you decrease the stitches and knit the button band as 2x2, and then once you want to start the double knitting again, probably knit one, cast on one stitch, knit one, cast on one stitch, knit one, cast on one stitch, until you get back to the stitch count for the double knit button band. So that is something I am considering. I will say, so I have always loathed double knitting. It just takes so long. I think I just have flashbacks to the first cardigan I ever knit, which was cardigan number 8. And at that point, I had only been knitting for like 3-ish months, I want to say. So the button band took me forever. Like it took me, I think, almost a month, at least several weeks to do. And it was just such a labor intensive process that it really put me off of doing double knit button bands. But like the button band on the Orkney, I know it was a shorter button band because it didn't include like the neckline and I only did it on one side, but that took me less than a night to knit. So I guess I've come to a point where I realize that double knit button bands really aren't that bad. And when they fit the garment, when I like the look of them, it's definitely worth the extra effort to do them, especially because I think they're just more stable than a regular like 1x1 or 2x1 button band. Although I do like the way that the button band turned out on my cardigan number 9, is it? Yes. And I talked about this cardigan, I think, like 2 episodes ago, but I did modify the buttonholes in this cardigan, and I really like the way that turned out. I know this is like a complete side tangent, but okay, hopefully that's not too blown out. As you can see, I knit these longer buttonholes, and I like the way they look instead of a lot of times when you how this pattern is written on a lot of button bands that are written with the 1x1 ribbing, you basically just do a yarn over and you have like a single stitch hole for the button, but when you're using a larger button, that just ends up stretching out the ribbing. So when you knit this like longer buttonhole, I think it just lays a lot nicer and there's less like pulling around the fabric of the ribbing with this kind of buttonhole. And yeah, you can go back 2 episodes to see me talk about that more in depth, or you can also check my Ravelry notes because I linked the buttonhole tutorial that I followed. Oh, I should talk about the wool that I used in the sweater. So I'm using Retro Zaria Rosa Pomar. It's not Vovo. They sell it as a worsted weight, but I would say it's more of like a heavy DK. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of this. Oh, Brusca. I'm using Retro Zaria Rosa Pomar Brusca because this has been on my needle so long. I feel like I've talked about this yarn so many times, but it is made with, I think, native to Portugal sheep breeds. It is spun in Portugal. I think the company has a huge emphasis on supporting their local wool industry, which I love. And I was able to buy this from one of my localish yarn stores. I would totally buy this wool again. It is, again, another quite sheepy woolly wool. There is a lot of vegetable matter in this wool, but I don't mind. It just makes me feel closer to the sheep. And I do think they have a pretty nice color range for this. This is shade number C. I'm unsure if it's an undyed color or they dyed it this like brown walnutty color. Either way, I'm excited to finally eventually get this done because I think it will be a very versatile classic piece. I just realized all my whips for today are all cardigans because my last whip is also a cardigan. My last whip is a test knit. I think I talked about casting this on during my last podcast episode, and it is yet another cardigan. I hope it doesn't jangle too much. It's currently on partially on a stitch holder, partially on a cable. I basically have 3 or 4 projects at the same time that I needed to use 4mm needles for, so that's what's happening. We're living with it. We're dealing with it. Even though I feel like I have so many 4mm needle tips, apparently I don't have enough. So this is a top-down cardigan. Oh, did I say the name of it? It's the Tallulah Texture Cardigan. It is a test knit for Meepy the Label. It is a top-down cardigan knit with all different lace motifs. And I've definitely talked about in the past how I've never wanted to knit a lace garment in the past. They just seem really, really intimidating. And I kind of stand by that. I'll stand by that with an amendment. I don't want to knit a lace garment that has the same lace motif going throughout the whole thing. So I think that would be really overwhelming. What makes this feasible, approachable, doable to me is that you are knitting a bunch of motifs, smaller motifs for a smaller section. So it's not as daunting. And if you make a mistake, you can just frog that section instead of having to frog like 50 rows of lace trying to figure out where the yarn overs and drop stitches and everything is, because in between each of the sections, each of the charts, you do have some just like plain stockinette or garter rows, which I think is great if you are like me and you don't really like putting in lifelines. This is definitely more doable for me, and I think it just looks so darling. It's so, so freaking cute. I do think my yarn choice, my yellow color choice, does make it a little bit more like springy, but I think I will still get wear out of it in the fall because the chestnut is due at the beginning of November. I think my favorite motif so far is the one that you start off with. I know I just said like, oh, I don't want to knit a garment with all lace, but I feel like I would totally love a garment with just this lace pattern that's on the top. I think it's really pretty. It kind of reminds me of like butterflies or something. It's just so freaking cute. And the yarn that I'm using for this, so initially I did want to knit it with red, and I even actually bought some red Barocco wool. I bought the Lana's Light. Okay, what am I doing to my hair? I bought the red Lana's Light, the same base that I'm using for the ribbing on my Orkney cardigan. And I bought the red color to hold with some Surrey that I had in my stash from Woolberry. And I even cast on this project, but it was just looking kind of marled and I didn't love the way that it was looking. So I just ended up ditching that and I went with the yellow that I had been contemplating. And I think it's coming out very, very cute. I am kind of confused because this is Filcolana Pernilla and I bought it thinking it was like a sport weight / DK weight, like DK yarn. And I was able to hit gauge, and the pattern is written as a DK weight pattern, so that's great. But on Ravelry, the yarn is listed as a fingering weight, which confused me. It does have a lot of yardage, but I feel like it is considerably thicker than a fingering weight. So those are my thoughts on this yarn. I'm really excited to get this done. After I finish my Ravelry sweater, this will definitely be getting all my attention since it is due at the beginning of November. This yoke knit up really, really quickly, so I'm not worried about finishing the body in time, but I do think the sleeves will take some time. So I might try to do a few. I think my plan will be to finish up this ball of yarn because I don't have that much left of it, and then I will cast on the first sleeve to see how long that takes me. Also, somebody in the test knitting group modified their version to have a double knit button band, and because I'm, I guess, in my double knit button band era, I'm also thinking of modifying it to have a double knit button band, but I guess it depends on how much time I give myself to knit the button band. So yes, this pattern is so cute, and I think since the test knit is due at the beginning of November, I'm guessing that the pattern will be released then too. So I do have some acquisitions today. I'm going to split it into two sections. First, I'll talk about some of the stuff that I got at my local yarn store. And then next, I'll talk a little bit about the New Jersey Sheep and Fiber Festival that I went for the first time, as well as what I purchased. So my acquisitions actually have some, I don't know what to call this, but it's not a giveaway gift. It's let me just say what it is. So over the summer, I participated in my local yarn store's sock bingo board. I talked about it in a few episodes, so you can watch those previous episodes. But basically, it was a bingo board with all different like sock techniques. And if you got a bingo, you won a prize. And if you filled up the board, you got a prize. And I filled up my board, so I got two prizes. I got both prizes. And the prizes were these very, very cute stitch markers from Catrickles. But they're these very, very cute sock stitch markers, progress keepers, I guess you could call them, and they're in different colors, and then they say YSB24 for Yarnia, which is the name of my local yarn store, sock bingo. And I think they're so cute, and as soon as I get my sock mojo back, I will be using them. I keep calling them stitch markers, but I guess they're technically progress keepers because they have like the clasps on them. But yeah, so those are my little progress keeper acquisitions. When I went to Yarnia to pick up my sock bingo prizes, I did get some yarn. They were having their 7th anniversary sale, so they had some yarn on sale, including the La Bien-Aimée Mohair Silk. So this is a discontinued base now from La Bien-Aimée. So they had them for 30% off, and this is the yarn that I've been using in my Esther sweater, and I needed to buy another skein or two. So it was great to buy it when they had a 30% off sale. This is the color Amy's or Ami's shawl. It's a very, very pretty variegated color with like shades of pink, peach, and orange. And then so Yarnia also has their own podcast. Definitely go give it a listen. And during each podcast, they ask a question, and if you leave a comment answering the question, you will be entered to win a prize. And the prize is different each episode. And one episode they had the prize being you win a skein of La Bien-Aimée yarn, and I happened to win that giveaway. So when I was buying one skein on sale, I got the second skein for free as their giveaway prize. So that is that. This yarn is so, so pretty, and I'm very excited to start knitting on that project again. Probably not until November because I want to get my Rhinebeck sweater and my test knits done, but it will be back on the needles soon because this yarn is too pretty to resist. And I'm really sad that they discontinued this base because I don't know of any other hand dyers or just yarn brands in general who use this base. It's a 70-30 blend, and it has 547 yarns for 50 grams. So if you know any other either hand dyed or commercially dyed yarn that has the same yarn base, like please do share. I would love to buy more of it in the future. So that is that for my local yarn store purchases. Oh, I also bought that Barocco yarn in red that I talked about, but I'm going to return 2 of them that I didn't use, and then the last one is just going into stash. I'm sure it will be used in some project at some point. Then the rest of my yarn purchases are from the New Jersey Sheep and Fiber show. After I finish talking at the end of this video, I'll put some like cute little clips of the sheepies and stuff that I saw there. This was my first time going to the New Jersey Sheep and Fiber Show. The only like wool festival I've ever been to is Rhinebeck, and I've only been there once last year for the first time. The New Jersey Sheep and Fiber Show was much smaller, but it had like the same kind of vibe, and you see the same kind of stuff. They have a bunch of different sheep there. They have all different breeds. You can talk to the farmers, talk to the people who are raising the sheep. They're really kind. They'll tell you about their farms. They'll tell you about their animals. I personally had no idea that there were so many sheep farms in New Jersey. I think because the part of the state that I live in is like the most densely populated area, so there's really no space for farms. But I know if you go west, if you go south, there's definitely more farmland, and that's where all these farms are. And I mean, the sheep were so cute, and it was really cool seeing the sheep with some of, I guess, like the types of wool that I'm familiar with, that I've heard of. And it's also cool to know that these sheep farmers also sell their wool, so I can actually buy some locally made wool. Because I feel like that's something I hear people from, like, I mean, I primarily watch English speaking podcasts, so a lot of, I feel like people in the UK talk about, oh, I was able to get this local wool, or even like people in other parts of Europe are able to say like, oh, I got this local wool. Like, it's nice to support my local economy and nice to get local wool, and it's more affordable, and I can never relate to that. But now that I've been to this New Jersey Sheep and Fiber Festival, I know that there are so many New Jersey sheep farmers and yarn available. The thing is that for a lot of them, I don't think they have a huge online presence. So going to the Fiber Festival is honestly, I think, the easiest way to get their yarn. And that's fine because I don't need to buy yarn that regularly anyways, because I need to work through my stash. But it was just nice to learn that there are so many sheep farms in New Jersey, and that local wool is available to me. Local yarn is available to purchase. And of course, I had to buy some. Like, I couldn't go there and not buy anything, not buying nothing. I couldn't leave it empty-handed. Like, that just wasn't an option. Before I talk about the yarn, I should mention that in addition to the sheep, they also had like sheep sharing going on the whole time, which is so cool. They also had one huge barn that was just dedicated to buying fleeces and spinning. Like, there were so many people there. I'm sure if I wanted to, I could have asked them for demonstrations on how to use a spinning wheel. Like, people were very friendly and talkative. I just was a little bit shy, and I was hungry also. I hadn't eaten lunch. We were gonna go to lunch afterwards. So yeah, I didn't take advantage of that opportunity at that time. But it's good to know it's there in the future. And then there's also a bunch of people selling hand-dyed yarns and other sheepy goods. There was a vintage button stand, which I had to visit, of course, and I did get some stuff from there. And then there were also some local yarn, some that my whole like essay that I was talking about before, my excitement at finding local wool and local yarn. I had to buy some of that. So without further ado, let's talk about my yarn purchases. Oh no, my sunny angel, fall down. Okay. I bought yarn from 2 different vendors. So this yarn actually, I have to look at my phone because I don't have pictures of the labels, but this is some undyed brown worsted weight wool. It is pretty tightly wound up, so it doesn't look huge, but these are actually 4-ounce balls, so that is more than 100 grams. Hopefully that's a little bit brighter. So as I was saying, these are 4-ounce balls. They're more than 100 grams. I have to look at my pictures to see what the sheep breeds of this was. I bought this from Swayze Inn Farm in Hope, New Jersey, and this is wait, that's the wrong picture. That is the right farm, but this is a worsted weight 50/50 blend Jacob and Rommeldale yarn, 4 ounces, 225 yards, $18 each. So yeah, I bought 5 balls of these, so that is more than enough to make a sweater, even maybe a cabled sweater. I'm unsure of what I'm going to knit with this yarn, but it's so pretty. Like, this color is so pretty, and they had some knit up samples of it, and it felt quite soft. I have heard of Jacob sheep, but I have not heard of Rommeldale yarn, and yeah, I'm really, really excited to knit this up. This is definitely going to be something I'd like to knit this fall or winter. And hopefully, if I enjoy it, I can go back to next year's New Jersey Sheep and Fiber Festival and buy more yarn because I had other undyed colorways. One thing I noticed for all of the like local yarn that I saw is that most of them did tend to be undyed, which I personally love. I love the natural color of sheep. Those are like my favorite kind of neutrals. So I was totally into it. And I think I've talked about it before, but like this dark, really chocolatey brown has been my favorite neutral color for like the past 2 years. So that is that. And then I went to the other farm booth that I shopped from was Duck Flats Farm in Flemington, New Jersey. This is just kind of crazy to me because I used to live near Flemington when I was like in elementary school, and my family always used to go to Flemington to like shop and stuff, and I had no idea that there was a sheep farm there. So I got this is like such an exciting project for me. I got a cone of yarn. This is my first ever yarn cone. For whatever reason, I just think yarn on a cone is so much cooler and better. So yeah, I got this yarn cone. When I asked, they were unsure about the yardage, but their best guess was it is about 700. Okay, they said 700 yards, but looking at this, like this looks like so much freaking wool. Maybe she actually said 700 grams. Maybe I should weigh it. I mean, I don't know how much the cardboard weighs. The cardboard can't weigh that much. Okay, so best estimation, what the information I was given is it's estimated to be about 700 yards, and it's a fingering weight wool, and it is fin sheep, which is what they grow, I think, they raise primarily on their farm. I think they might also, they had some other blends of yarn that had fin sheep with mixed with other American wool. But I'm pretty sure this one was just fin sheep. And their fin sheep like samples that they had knit up felt so, so, so soft. I totally wanted to buy more, but have to show some self-restraint. I was just so excited by the cone. And this cone was such a good price too. I think it was like $22 or $25 for a freaking cone. Me and my first cone baby. I'm so excited to knit this. I have no idea what I'm going to knit with it. And even though it is a fingering weight, but you can see like the yarn end, it's so plump for a fingering weight yarn. Very, very excited to knit this up. If anybody has suggestions on how I can calculate the yardage, maybe I should just skein it up or cake it up with my ball winder. Oh, maybe I was thinking I could weigh it, then cake some up and weigh that. No. Anyways, if you have ideas on how I can estimate the yardage of this, please do share because I would love to know. And actually, at this booth, they also had a basket where you could get a free skein of yarn. And I went with my family, and nobody else is a knitter. So technically, I guess I could have taken more free skeins. I wanted other people to appreciate the free skeins because it could have been like they could have taken a free skein and then I would have just used them all. But I was nice. I only took one free skein. So this is this really, really nice, again, that chocolatey brown color that I'm a sucker for. This is a 2-ply yarn, approximately 4 ounces, approximately 206 yards. Yeah. I would say it's like a worsted weight then, based on the weight and yardage. Actually, looking at like the strands, these two are kind of similar. Maybe this is 700 yards of a worsted weight yarn. That could make sense to me. Because looking at them next to each other, they look kind of similar, like in terms of the construction of them. I don't know. What do you think? Overall, I had such a good time there. It was really, really fun. I noticed like I think the prices in general for stuff there tended to be a little bit less expensive than at Rhinebeck. Also, it was much smaller, but it was also much less overwhelming. Like there was never any booth that I felt like I couldn't get to because there were so many people there. But there was still like a lot of stuff to see. And like I said, I went with my family, and none of them are knitters, but they did find like other stuff to buy, like soap. They had like some stand that had like goat's milk soap, and then they sold like dry flowers. And there was this woman who made felted goods that my mom was like really obsessed with. So yeah, even if you are not a knitter, I think you would have a good time there, or just like check out your local sheep and fiber festival. You never know what you will find. Oh, one last thing that I bought. I said I went to the button vendor. So one thing that I was really excited to see at last year's Rhinebeck was the vintage button booth. I felt like I saw so many people talking about it, and it did not disappoint. There were so many cool buttons, but one, it was very crowded, and two, a lot of the buttons were quite expensive, which is totally, to be fair, it's just because I was not buying buttons for a specific project. I didn't know if I wanted to spend like $15 or $20 on some buttons. I did end up buying, I think, one set of buttons. The vendor who was at the New Jersey Ship and Fiber Festival, who was a different vendor, I'm pretty sure I took a picture of their business card, so I will insert that somewhere on the screen. They also had an extensive selection of buttons, and they did have like pricier buttons, and they had like the really cool buttons with like a rich history in them. But they also had quite a few affordable buttons. Like they had a lot of affordable buttons actually. I could have bought so many more buttons, but I held myself back because I didn't want to buy buttons willy-nilly with no project in mind. Which I still did, but I only bought 2 sets of buttons. So first are these red, like, is it acetate? I don't know. They're these floral buttons, and they're so pretty. I had actually been thinking of putting them on my Rhinebeck sweater, but I knit the button band a little too thin to do that. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of these, and these were $7, which I thought was a great price. And then I got these vintage mother of pearl buttons, and they come in all different designs, but they're like the same size. Very happy with my button purchases. And when I was purchasing these, I'm like, oh, maybe that means like I won't have to buy any buttons at Rhinebeck. Maybe I won't, because I'm very satisfied with these purchases, but also maybe I will, because I don't think either of these buttons work with, like, this one definitely doesn't work with the brown or the yellow cardigan. I think this would work better with either a Colorwork or a red cardigan. These pearl buttons might work for either of those cardigans. I'm not sure. But I will keep my 2 cardigan whips in mind when I go to Rhinebeck and go to the vintage button stall. Okay, that is a wrap on my acquisitions and a wrap on this video. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. As always, please feel free to leave a comment sharing what you are knitting or working on, because I'm nosy and I would love to know. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like and follow along. The next video will probably be my in-depth video on the Orkney cardigan, talking more about my process, picking the colors, just clips of me working on it, yada. Maybe at the end I will talk about wearing it and talk about Rhinebeck. I'm unsure yet. That is at least like a week or 2 in the future from when I'm currently recording this. I think that's all I have to say for now. Yeah. Happy knitting. Hope to see you again next time. Bye. Oh, and if you are at Rhinebeck, because I guess when this video is going on, it's currently happening, I hope you have a great time. I hope you get yummy food and pictures of your knits and just enjoy the beautiful fall weather, knock on wood that it is. Currently, it is showing that it's going to be mid-60s and sunny, which is like the perfect day for knitwear. So let's manifest that for all of us. Okay, truly the end of this video. Happy knitting and bye.
It's confusing people, right? They are great. I love these.
I don't even see anything. His eyes are on the side.